Welcome, Dr. Rob.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Weiss. I am a sex addict, and I
Hi, Rob.
have been in the recovery process myself since 1985. So I've been working on these issues for about over 30 years. In the last 25, I've been practicing as a professional in the area specifically of intimacy disorders, sex addiction, porn addiction, all that stuff. I trained with Patrick Carnes for a number of years. I've run and created a number of treatment programs. And I've written, I think, 10 books, Tammy, actually, which is pretty crazy. The reason that we're here is because we have developed this site, which is geared toward giving you as much information and support as we can at no cost. I really believe as a social worker that you guys deserve to be able to know everything you can and learn everything you can about healing and recovery, whether or not you have the money to go to therapy or have the guts to go to a treatment, a 12-step program. If you want it, you'll find it here. So Tammy has been the master of creating groups. We have drop-in groups for addicts, drop-in groups for partners. We have educational webinars. We're building out an entirely full menu of treatment options that are free. So everything you do on the site will be at no cost. We're giving this away because this is our belief that if we give this away, a lot more people will be healed. And so I'm here every week at 5 o'clock California time. I'm also on intherooms.com at 6 o'clock California time on Friday nights. And all I do is I'm really here to answer questions. It's my belief that questions about sex, intimacy, relationships are hard ones to ask. You often don't have the expert to talk to. I'm someone who is pretty much at the top of the food chain around this work. You can't come see me in my office because I'm not seeing people individually, but you can see me here for free. And I will give you any answer I can, any direction I can, any support I can from the knowledge base that I have of 30 years of doing this work. And hopefully that will be helpful to you and you'll pass it on to others. That's how it works.
I'm going to just clarify too what a drop-in group is. So for those of you who have not joined a drop-in group, I can see Dr. Rob and he can see me. You are able on a drop-in group to see each other if you so choose. You can also not share your camera, but it is not recorded. So it's an opportunity for you to connect with other people. So like we were talking about the male partner group, it's men who are betrayed partners and they get to connect with other people that are like them and offer support and get support from other people in that group. So it's different than this where you're asking an expert questions. So, okay.
And let me just say that both are needed. You guys, in my experience, both need support, education, all your questions, excuse me, all your questions answered. Thank you. And then you also need a place to just talk to each other about how crappy this all is and how hard this all is and how, just to get support. And that's what we're trying to do is create that environment that you can have without leaving your house.
So we'll get started. The first question is, does compulsive or OCD tendencies coincide with porn addiction or is it interdependent?
It's a good question. I think what you're really asking is, are there mental health conditions like obsessive compulsive disorder or attention deficit disorder, ADD, that can correlate with addictive or compulsive sexual behavior? And so let me answer that. If someone is untreated they have a compulsive disorder and they're checking stoves and they're checking, they always take the same exit on the freeway. They're, always step out of the shower the same way. They know how many stripes I have on my tie. People who tend to be really OCD, they can also be compulsive in the area of like compulsive masturbation. But it's most often true that if somebody is profoundly obsessive in that way, that when they're stable on medication and they're no longer acting in an obsessive way around checking the stove or washing their hands or checking for germs, or that the masturbation piece will go away too. So even though there is, call it sexual compulsivity, most people who have obsessive compulsive disorder are treated for that and stabilized for that, and then generally don't have the compulsive masturbation as an issue. But just to say, we do have one absolute correlation with attention deficit disorder. There's about a 20% correlation. So about 20% of sex addicts tend to have some kind of problem with ADD.
That's an interesting statistic. Okay. The next question, our CSAT therapist has my hubby working on Facing the Shadows workbook. He is finding it both dry and challenging, loved Out of the Doghouse, and wondering if your sex addiction workbook so that'd be the Sex Addiction 101 workbook, was perhaps drafted in an easier to follow, understand format similar to that of Out of the Doghouse?
So actually, that's a pretty easy question. The workbook that you're working in, which is Dr. Karn's workbook, I believe, that the CSATs use, is really, I think, in many ways written for therapists. Oh, thank you for that. Photobomb. Somebody just came by and gave me the workbook.
Oh,
so thank you very much.
Thank you, Vanna.
So I think that the work that Pat has done is really meant to be worked on with a therapist in detail, with a lot of intention, a lot of sessions, a lot of work. Oftentimes that work is done in residential and inpatient treatment. When I wrote this specifically because I wanted to have something easy. So if your therapist didn't know sex addiction that well, or if you were working with a sponsor and didn't even have a therapist, you would still know, just like this work, you would still be able to find out what steps do we take you through in treatment. And if you end up going to one of our treatment programs, you'll find some of the exercises that we use in treatment are in the workbook. So yes, it is easier. Yes, it is less dry, but it is not written at the same level that Dr. Karn's work is written. This is much more about your average person.
Agree. So next question. Hi, Dr. Rob. I am currently a recovering sex addict and have been attending daily SAA telephone meetings. I have been calling sponsors and fellowship people who leave their numbers, but half of them don't call me back or say busy, but call anytime, so I call again. I really just want to find a sponsor so I can keep moving forward and am getting frustrated. I even went to an SAA and registered to get the number list of sponsors, and they never sent me anything. Is there somewhere else I can go to get some guidance? I live in a remote area with no access to face-to-face meetings.
Okay, well, I can absolutely answer that for you. First of all, you're talking to us, and we are more than glad to connect you to resources. So if you write us a note on the Sex and Relationship Healing website and you just click on Contact Us, we will connect you with people to find who will support you. But to answer your question in a more general way, addicts are flaky. You know, we don't have it together. And oftentimes that person you might turn to, or the 2 or 3 people you turn to, you might only end up getting one consistent person out of the 5 people you turn to. I actually think that one of the great things about 12-step programs is that addicts often, if we start a relationship or we're looking for something from someone and they aren't able to deliver or show up, we often kind of, okay, fine, I'll take my marbles and go home. And one of the things I really like about 12-step program is this issue, which is, you know, that person didn't really respond to me. How am I going to handle that? I'm going to try again. I'm going to go to another person. I'm going to go to another person until you find that person who will respond to you. It forces you in some ways to take care of yourself by making sure you find the person who's consistent in the way that you need them to be. I would also say to you that I think just taking random numbers is not, and I don't know if you did that or not, I really think you have to say, hi, I want a sponsor in your meeting, online or on the phone. I'm looking for a sponsor. I'm looking for someone who will call me back. I'm looking for someone who is really regular and consistent. If that's what you want, you will find it if you ask for it. But I think you have to be more direct than just taking numbers. And yes, people are flaky, and yes, they put themselves first, and yes, they struggle. Welcome to who we are, people who struggle. And hopefully this will be a lesson to you so that if you stay with the process and people start calling you, you'll always call them back. You'll always be available to them because you'll have learned something.
Well, and I was thinking the drop-in groups that we mentioned, there's a men's sex addiction group on Monday mornings at 10:45 a.m. Pacific time, but there's also a men's sex and porn addiction group on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Pacific time. And I know that those are great places to also connect. You can be anywhere in the world because people are showing up from anywhere in the world. And there'll be more of those opportunities as well. And there's some people that have there's a moderator there that's got some quality sobriety, you know, so
and let's just try this. Let me just try this. If there's anyone in the room right now who would be willing to sponsor this person, who has some experience in recovery, who is a male, who is consistent and willing to help and wants to show up, drop us a note and say, I'm willing to sponsor that person. And whoever this is writing us, say, I'm looking for a sponsor, and we will put the two of you together.
That would be, and you can do that in the chat.
Or you can even go in the chat and say, I'd like to sponsor someone.
Okay. So hello again. I've been asking questions about my intimacy problems. I'm a single female in mid-30s, want a kid, but have no desire to deal with men. I'm very jaded since my divorce. Went out to dinner last night. Guy tells me he's married but unhappy, asking if I want in. I'm so sick of guys being like this. And oops, it slid. And let's see, blaming, telling me that the marriage and monogamy are unnatural. Am I chasing after a dream? I know. I feel that people can be happy single and people can be happy in a couple if they find the right person. No need to lie to your partner. I never cheated on my ex. I feel like we should end a relationship before dragging someone else into your unhappy marriage. I feel that guys are cowards who want their cake and eat it too. Am I naive to want a man with some integrity? Treat people how you want to be treated.
Wow, that's a lot. So I hear somebody's really, really hurt and angry about the unavailability and the inconsistencies and the lies and the manipulation of the men you've been going out with. I do want to defend my race, my gender, and say I think there are a lot of guys who are really decent and stand up, but you really have to take the time to date a lot and get to know them. We have, when in our groups and in some of the work, I think in one of my workbooks, we have very clear structure around dating. And I really discourage anybody who comes to a room like this to date without support of people who are in rooms like this, because we're just not always good daters. And it sounds like you're a pretty good dater. You're hearing the things that you don't want and you're saying no to them. That's great. But there need to be ways that you can find some of the healthy people that you're looking for too. And our process is not about just stopping bad behavior. It's also about how do I embrace health? And I think if you walk into and spend some time in rooms like this, you'll have a better opportunity to make better decisions about who you go out with. I would also say to you that I personally, and just to say for me, I don't think I'd go out with someone who was married. And I would know before I went out with them that they were. So I would never have gotten to that coffee date. And if I was really getting the support from other people, someone in my cohort, my sponsor, my friend, my other recovering person would have said to me, have you asked him if he's married yet? Because they know. And they would ask, and then I wouldn't go on that date. So I just think part of what we learn how to do in the process is to really be very careful about who we let into our lives. But I really, really want to caution you about this. Human beings are meant to be pair bonded. We do best when we are in a relationship with another meaningful partner who is good to us. Those of us who are pair bonded in good relationships live longer, are more creative, have longer and more successful work lives, have better friendships. It's just how it goes. We are better in relationship than we are single. By the way, if you're in a bad relationship, you're in the same place as the single people in terms of life expectancy and happiness. So clearly, if we do better in relationship, universally, research tells us that, then we should be looking for a healthy, good relationship where with someone we can stand and tolerate, who isn't going to hurt us, who we're interested in, and hopefully we can grow something where the two of us can be those people who do better together than single. But yeah, I do not think, nor do I encourage women who are your age to say, I'm done with dating, because I think that's unfair. That's like saying, I'm never going to reward myself. Just because you haven't been able to find a way to find a healthy person doesn't mean that you should give up on the whole thing. But maybe hanging around here and talking to some of us might give you some clues about how to have healthier dating experiences.
Well, and the thought came to me, and you've shared before, of like, if you're 3, you can't expect to have a 7 or something like that. So like I had to work on me to be in a place to get a healthy person. That was a big part of me changing my patterns, was I had to work on me. So I don't know, I don't know exactly where you're at, or I am with Rob though. I don't give up. I've got like an amazing man in the other room, and there are great men out there. So they're worth picking through the rocks to find the right one.
And here's another little thought about this. If you tend to date unhealthy people, you probably will always tend to date unhealthy people. But don't give up on dating. There are unhealthy people, like a lot of the people in this room, who were unhealthy, but now they're living healthy lives. They're going to therapy. They're going to 12-step meetings. They used to be not such great people, but now we're much better people to each other and to ourselves. So maybe you could meet someone that you're attracted to who is a little dysfunctional, but they're already in therapy. They're already in a 12-step program. In other words, they've already gotten to that point of self-realization, self-awareness, and they want to grow. So you're attracted to some of the dysfunction, okay, but make sure in an intellectual way that they're on the path to healing. And by the way, the biggest issue is, in my mind, in relationships, is being accountable. If I can say I made a mistake, that was me, rather than it's all your fault, you're the bad one. That's not a relationship. We need to be able to own our stuff in a relationship. What part is mine? What part is yours?
Well, she tags in and says, I will talk to my support before I date the next guy and try to stay positive.
Okay, wait, there's one more thing for you though. Let me tell you this. Make a dating plan. Sit down and write 10 things that you absolutely do not want in someone you're dating. Married, heroin addict, smokes, and then make a list of 10 things you really do want. So start to define it before you meet someone, because what happens to a lot of us folks is we meet somebody and we get all interested in their hair and their eyes and moonbeams and starlight, and then we forget, oh yeah, that's right, they're married and they're a heroin addict. So I think it's best to make a list of these kinds of things and work on that list with your support group so that when you go to date, you make sure that the person you're dating is already within your parameters of what you were looking for. Yeah.
Okay. Somebody said, could you give us a reference for the dating plan worksheet? And I think John Taylor did a dating plan worksheet on one of his webinars. So you might want to check that out.
It's in this workbook. There is the dating plan's in here.
There you go. That's even better.
I can even show
you. How
easy
is that? So.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Okay. My partner and I are getting back together after being separated for 4 years because of our mess addiction. A mess addiction or method? It says mess, but he recently
mess addiction. Well, meth is messy.
Kind of a mess. So he recently went to rehab and I went to prison, and today our life is structured around our recovery program and things are new for us. And I would like some advice as to what best we could do other than work or individual programs of recovery in the 12-step fellowship so that we can do to remain intimate now that we are pursuing a career together where we will be driving over the road. My second question, so they're looking, okay, did you get that part before I go to the
second so, part? Keep going.
Okay. My second question is, because we are driving over the road and we are constantly gone, getting one-on-one counseling through different agencies that are available to us under funding is difficult because they all have want face-to-face meetings, and there's some insurance questions.
What's the broad question inside of this, Tammy? If you can read through it, what do you think?
A virtual counselor, well, it's like, how are we going to do life over the road together is one aspect of it.
One day at a time.
Yeah. A virtual counselor that meets Skype. The insurance questions, I really can't answer any of that kind of stuff. We can point you towards resources, but I can never keep track of who does what insurance. So. But anyway.
But write us and we'll be glad to refer and recommend. Yes. I think part of the answer is, this is what we're doing. I mean, whether you're in Omaha or New York or Ohio or Thailand, you can show up here every week and go to a drop-in group. You can show up every week and go to a 12-step meeting. I mean, the gift of online is you can see the same people and get the same support wherever you are in the world. And so I would take as much advantage of that as you possibly can so that you can have constancy even though your life is a moving target.
I agree, because all of these groups are created so you can be anywhere at any time.
I love it when you agree with me, Tammy. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We agree a lot. So, okay. Almost every woman I have met in SLAA is also in Overeaters Anonymous. That's not a surprise, but interesting. Among other fellowships, it has made me take a look at my own food, and since I've been in recovery, I may be turning a bit to food. So why are so many SLA women in OA?
Almost all of us who have these issues struggle with them because we had challenging experiences in our upbringing, and and this is something we call trauma. So it could be neglect, it could be abuse, it could be being a latchkey kid, it could be sexual abuse, it could be a parent who was failing and they turned to you as a child to take care of them. There are all kinds of ways to be traumatized, but generally what tends to come out of that trauma is the kinds of challenges that we're talking about today. So hold on a second. Men, I think, men have a greater capacity to compartmentalize, period. So we can put things in our head like war or sex and put it in a little box. And even though we may be suffering and it's painful, we're generally able to go on and function okay, even though we have painful little boxes in our heads. Women tend to be more global, more holistic in their challenges. So if you if I abuse a woman early in life, she probably will have issues not just with intimacy, but also with other issues. Food in women in particular is something that I see a lot. Women will bounce back and forth between an eating issue and a sexual issue. And really, it's about the same thing. It's about comfort and nurturing and consistency. And when someone's feeling disrupted, what is comfortable, consistent, and nurturing? Well, there's nothing like a quart of Haagen-Dazs to take care of that. So the issue, and when I'm lonely and desperate, and for sex and love addicts, we're looking for comfort, consistency, and nurturing, not necessarily sex. But we turn to the sex wanting the comfort, consistency, and nurturing. So really the issue is that women who have these kinds of early injuries will turn often to more than one substance or experience, turn one off, the other one gets turned on. It's kind of like a leaky dam addiction is. You put your hole in one hole, you put your finger in one hole and the water comes out somewhere else. So in those cases, it's more of a global issue of not only kind of plugging up the addictions, but looking underneath at what is driving this. You know, is it an enduring sense of loneliness? Is it some kind of abuse that I haven't worked through? Is what is triggering me to jump back and forth between these addictions? Because the issue is clearly not familiarity with the food or the sex issue. It's some engine underneath of pain or hurt that's driving wherever you are, you're kind of losing yourself, either in the food or the sex. So I think there's work to do underneath. You can only go to so many 12-step programs. At a certain point, you have to say, wait a minute, this is the same issue showing up in all a variety of places. I need to find a place to get more soothing underneath that.
For me, food was, I could absolutely numb out on food just like I could with any other addiction. So it really is, it is accomplishing the same mission of not having to feel and deal with things.
It also accomplishes the mission of not feeling anything. I'm lonely, I'm sad, I beat a quarter Haagen-Dazs, then all I feel is sick and horrible about myself, which is familiar, but at least I don't feel lonely anymore. You know, it really is a way of exchanging one set of feelings for another.
Agree. So I am a recovering sex addict. I'm in the early days of step work, 6 days sober, slip after step 1 presentation and 40 days sober. My sponsor gave me the green light for step 4 about an hour ago. However, my spouse has taken all of this very hard, as she should, she should, as I have really hurt her through our 25 plus years of marriage. I fear she's looking for the amends phase as a punishment phase for me. I don't know if she wants to continue the marriage long term. I wonder what thoughts you have on or particular emphasis that comes to mind.
Tammy, are they talking about disclosure? Is that what I kind of heard?
I think you need to discuss disclosure, but step 4 is not about disclosure. So perhaps sharing.
Why don't you talk about step 4 and I'll talk about disclosure?
Sure. So step 4 is making a fearless and searching moral inventory of ourselves. For me, I also had to learn to put some good things in there, some things that I do, you know, that were positives, because all I could find was all the negatives. So, but it was really, it's one piece at a time, and it sounds like you've got a sponsor that is helpful. So lean into the sponsor and have them help guide what that's supposed to look like. I am a big fan of doing it earlier. I know people that have relapsed bunches of times because it's, you know, they're been hanging around 2 years and they haven't gotten around to the 4th step because they're scared. So it was so freeing to do my 4th and 5th step. I also really think don't look at the future amends steps. Right now, focus on step 4. And then you'll do step 5. There's a reason there's steps, because you do 1 and then you do the next and then you do the next. And you've got somebody, like I said, a good sponsor that's helping guide you. As for supporting your wife, Dr. Rob will talk about disclosure, but it's really, disclosure is very different than doing the steps. So why don't you share about disclosure, and then we can talk about supporting.
So doing your inventory, step 4, is really an inside job. It's not about talking to your spouse. In fact, it's really important that you do it and you put it in a place where she or he is not going to find it, because spouses are anxious and they want to know everything, and they'll go through our stuff, you know, just because they want to know. And this is something that I don't think this is for you. But in treatment, we do something with people who are trained to do it, and Tammy can refer to those people wherever you might live. We do something called disclosure. We believe that healthy couples in sex addiction work, that healthy couples, if they're going to grow intimacy, if they're going to heal the pain, if they're going to regain trust, really can't move forward with secrets. Secrecy is what drives addiction. Secrecy is what drives shame. And ultimately, secrecy is what leaves your partner distant from you. So we do ask people to do an inventory of their whole behavior history and anything their spouse doesn't know about. And then we prepare the spouse in a very formal way. The spouse is getting support, you're getting support. We sit you together, we go through the history. Everybody knows everything that's happened. No more secrets. It's all out in the open. Then your partner gets to decide if she wants to stay with you or not. And if so, what is acceptable to her going forward, or him. You get to decide what parts of this you want to deal with now, what parts you want to deal with later, but it's not an amends. It's not, I did all this stuff and I'm really sorry. When we do disclosure, it's more of an inventory. Like, this is what you thought our marriage was, but here's some other things you didn't know about. And I know that you can't move forward, and partners often can't until they know what's gone on. So I'm going to tell you. But we don't simply tell our partners because it makes us feel better or in a casual situation. It has to be done, I believe, in a very structured way so that, and here's an example. Once you've done disclosure, you may not want to spend the night together. You may not want to spend that week together. So what kind of support are you going to get? You're going to drive home in separate cars, whatever. It's all planned in advance with professionals. So if you're going to do a disclosure, and your spouse, I believe, has the right to have one, write Tammy and ask for somebody who might refer you to, who might be a therapist for you wherever you live, who does this kind of work. But for yourself, in your inventory, that's an inside job. It's for you, your sponsor, and your higher power.
And your 4-step inventory is not the disclosure. It's like Dr. Rob said, it's very professionally managed so that she gets the inventory, he or she, but she gets the information she needs, but not the details she can never get out of her head. So that's really important. But for her, it sounds like, I don't know if she's getting support, but I would really invite her to be part of connecting on this website. But there's also therapists, if she's looking for a support therapist to help her through this process. It is traumatic. The other thing is, I'm going to mention Dr. Rob's book, Out of the Doghouse, which is helping to rebuild trust. It gives you you can do these things. And a lot of it's just showing up and not saying, oh, I'm sorry. It's about what you're actually doing. It can get better, and I hope for your marriage it does. So we're here to help you.
And I want to say something to all the spouses in the room is that, let me explain to you why you need support. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's not that you're crazy or you're codependent or you're anything. It's that you've been living with us. And if you're living with someone who's crazy, you're going to go crazy too. How many times have any of us said to you, oh, I never said I was going to be home at this time, but you remember we kind of said that we would home, or I won't be home this weekend because we wanted what we wanted, and a lie would get us there. So you're beginning to sort out what has been the truth of my life, what has been the lies, and it's all very traumatic, and then trying to figure out who we are because you thought we were this and now you find out we're that. You are unfortunately needing help because you've been living with us. And sorting out the fantasy of what that was to the reality and then how you're going to move forward, that's what the therapy is about. Not looking at your problems, but looking at the challenges that have arisen since you've been with us. Unfortunately, we've left you that legacy. That's why the spouses need support.
Yeah, and I agree. It's through a trauma. I mean, a lot of this is you got hit with information that you never saw coming. It's grieving the loss of the relationship you thought you had, grieving the loss of the life you thought you had. So, can you find a path through this? Absolutely.
And let me say, just for the gentleman who said, I've been in a 25-year marriage and my wife is just finding out, that is profound trauma for this woman. That she is finding out for the first time, and I really want you to hear this in a loving way, that the man she thought she married is not who he is, that things she thought were true are lies, that the person she always thought would have her back and would never hurt her was actually actively going out there and doing things you knew would hurt her and you didn't care. She's never going to look at you in the same way. The relationship is never going to be the same. And this is massively traumatic for somebody who's been with you for a long time. Her whole life has been wrapped around your whole life. And now she finds out that the life she thought the two of you had wasn't true. What partners often go through is not, I no longer believe you around how you spend time or who you're talking to. Spouses often are left with the feeling of, and we don't always get this, I don't trust anything about you. We think trust is parsable. Like, honey, I was just lying about the sex, but everything else, I was honest. I came home, I put the money in the bank, I was on time. But as a partner, and this is what we have to understand, you're more thinking like, I don't trust anything you're saying. I don't trust anything that we had in the past. I don't trust what we're going to have moving forward. You guys have lost trust in us globally. And that is a profound trauma for someone who's living with someone for 25 years as their best friend. So yeah, your spouse is going to need a tremendous amount of support, and you are going to need to be tremendously patient with her. It will take at least a year, if not more, before the rage, the boil, before the, what do you call it? The boil is off, like before she stops, the intensity of her anger could be a year. And you're going to have to adapt to the fact that you have created this circumstance and now you got to live with it. And not only that, but you have to be empathic to the pain she's experiencing. And that's why Tammy mentioned out of the doghouse, because I think that men in general, we're kind of fixers. We like to fix things. That's one of our problems. We don't listen. You come home and you say, I have a terrible day. I fought with my boss. I want to get in there and tell you how to refight that argument, as opposed to saying, wow, I'm sorry you had a hard day. Let me give you a hug. Because men tend to be problem solvers. So why can't we solve the problem of cheating on a woman? Because we so often underestimate the degree of pain that it causes, and the betrayal and the trauma. And that's why I wrote Out of the Doghouse.
And I just want to tag onto this. I don't want this to be, oh, you should feel more shame and relapse again. The thing that's going to help continue to move you through this is to do the 4th step and then do the 5th step, and keep showing up and do the next right thing in your recovery program, and life changes. So, okay. Anything else on that one?
I just want to say, take a little commercial break to say just for a second that there are other avenues that we've provided for you guys. They're absolutely free at no cost, zero, where you can get support and gain information. I have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. Sex, Love, and Addiction. It's free. Podcasts are free. I have power pressured so many incredibly talented, skilled, smart therapists that I know from all over the country and all over the world to do podcasts with me. So there are so many answers for you about how do you reclaim a relationship? How do you heal trauma in a relationship? How do you learn to trust someone again? That's why we did it. Listen to the podcast. I have 7 years of writing for Psychology Today. I've written endless blogs about intimacy, sexuality, addiction. Read them. Go on our website and gather information, download the resources. We are trying to offer you as much as we possibly can. I hope that you are aware of it and taking advantage of it.
I love listening to the podcast, and we get so many people that email us and talk about that they've read the podcast or listened to the podcast as well. So, okay. So next component, I grew up in a very loving family. However, my mother has gone through 4 to 5 bouts of cancer and a stroke. I grew up seeing my mom after surgery, etc. Is there research on the impact this has on a child and maybe later connections to addiction? She also indicates that my father has always been an emotional mess about my mom's health, crying uncontrollably, fearful, anxious.
That was a lot. All I see, I'm reading this myself. I grew up in a loving family. My mother's been gone through. Okay. Right. So watching your mother go through cancer more than once is a profoundly traumatic experience for a child. Once is a profoundly, because there's so much going on. It's not just your mom. It's how is the family handling it, and what age were you? Because if it started when you were under 6, losing your mom to go to the hospital or losing your mom to chemo can be incredibly devastating for a child. Even if she's right in the next room, you've still lost her emotionally. So the ins and outs of cancer is a nightmare. It's a nightmare on the family. It's a nightmare on the mother, and it will absolutely reflect on the mental and emotional health of the child. So yeah, those are the kinds of traumas that, people hear the word trauma and they think sexual trauma. And I get that, but neglect, a mentally ill parent, a physically ill parent, a profound alcoholism or drug addiction in the family, profound financial issues that leave parents fighting all the time. These kinds of issues are very traumatic for a young child, and they have to find a way to survive. It may not always be relying on that parent, and that's how some of the issues that we deal with come up. So yes, that's meaningful, very. Was that both parts of that question, Tim?
Yes, she was just adding on that her dad had challenges dealing with it, was emotionally.
And here, let me say one more piece about that is oftentimes when there's a sick parent, a physically sick parent, part of the real challenge for the kids is they get leaned on by the other parent. So I'm not saying this happened to you, but it's a good reference for everyone else. If you become your dad's confidant, the person who makes him feel better, the person who makes him a meal, then you're turning more into a wife than a daughter. And when that kind of role change takes place, it's a form of abuse that ends up playing out in your life later. And even though you feel like I was doing my best for my dad, I wanted to be there for my dad, I wanted to help it was so painful for him, and I was a good daughter and I helped him, what also may happen in the process is that your childhood is lost to your dad's needs. And the reality is, if your dad's struggling with your mom's cancer, he needs to turn to other dads and other men and other adults and be a fully functioning father for his children, because their mother is sick. He not only doesn't need to be turning to his children need support also. So I'm beginning to hear where some of these issues might come from.
There's a new book that's coming out by Enid Gray about neglect. And you think of the typical forms of neglect, the overt neglect, but this is more subtle, and it's like that. And the child who doesn't get proper parenting because the parents were not able to do so for a variety of reasons. If there's illness or mental illness in the family, and the focus ends up being on that. So that book is coming out, I think, in the next few weeks. Stay tuned, because I think that we will. I know you're going to be doing a podcast with her on that topic, so that will be coming out. But I think that'll be helpful. So, next question. My husband is in good recovery, 8 months, yay, after sex addiction and multiple affairs through our 30 years of marriage. There is actually one woman he acted out with that I feel bad about. She has been his friend since college, and she has always written, called, and kept in touch with him. I think she truly cares for him as a friend and was seduced into performing a sex act on him 10 years ago. She recently called him again because he cut off contact with all his acting out partners, and she was concerned that she hadn't heard from him. I have told my husband that I would accept her as a friend at some point. Is this a terrible idea? Is their friendship just a casualty of his addiction? She's the only one of his acting out partners that I view as also a victim. That's it.
Tammy, I'm going to let you start with this one.
I feel your compassion for this woman. I really, I think that that's a really mature way to be able to look at that. And I honestly honor that. I really think it's what is comfortable for you and your husband with all of this. And is he in a safe place to be able to enter into a friendship? And I'm not sure if you were also the friend or if she was just his friend. So I'm not quite clear on that. But with all of this, it really is navigating it, for what's right for you and your husband and for her. And if it ends up being a safe place and you can find your way through it, I think I have a lot of debris in my past, so coming to a different place was super helpful.
And I want to just give a little slightly different feedback, which is that even if this woman was victimized, regardless of how this came about, your husband had sex with her in some capacity. And I don't think I would ever be comfortable with my partner who's struggling and has problems in this area continuing an intimate relationship with someone he'd had sex with, no matter the circumstances. I do think behavior has consequences. It's one of the big things we say in treatment. And I do like what you said about this might be a consequence for both of them. Look, this woman has other friends. She has her own life. She doesn't have to lean into your husband or your relationship. She had sex with your husband, whatever those circumstances were. And yeah, it may not be her fault that she has lost this relationship, but it is your husband's fault that she lost this relationship. And he is accountable for that, to both of you.
So there you go. Okay. Hubby and I have been doing really well since and being very positive and trying to stay positive and level, we will say. I have a bit of emotional slip when I had an off day last week, gave hubby a heads up that I was having an emotional roller coaster day and getting triggered easily. He works varied hours and I may have overreacted when it came to him working a tad later than expected. He never called to say he was stuck, staying a bit late. But yes, I found out when I asked if he was already on the way home, he let me know the situation. He came home and I was doing nothing wrong. He came home and he was doing nothing wrong. However, I couldn't keep my poop together, and naturally a little issue because became a became a big hurdle for us. I ended up breaking down when trying to explain accountability through sobs about the fears that went through my head. He cheated on me with a coworker in early recovery. All it did was upset him, and we were past the ability of healthy communication. What suggestions do you have for us navigating respectful communication?
Well, I want to go back to the scenario you described because I actually wrote that very scenario in Out of the Doghouse, that very thing. I said, what happens to the guy who for years came home late and you never knew whether he was having an affair or whatever he was doing, because now you know what he was doing when he was late. And now he's in recovery and working on it and trying to be a good spouse to you, and he comes home late. You're going to think immediately he's back at it. That is not your fault. That's natural. That's normal that you would be fearful when he's late and you don't. He is not doing his job, in my opinion, of helping reassure you that he's not back where he was. People who are really aware of the pain that you're in as a partner would call you and say, I'm running late. I wrote about this in Out of the Doghouse. I recommend you read it and throw it at your husband, because he needs to be you should not be blaming yourself for your reactivity. He should be saying, wow, whenever I come home late, of course she's going to be thinking this. And he needs to further say to you that when he walks in the door, when you're angry, not calm down, I wasn't doing anything, but wow, even though I wasn't doing anything right now and I was simply running late, I can completely understand how this would melt you down considering what I was doing before. That would be an empathic response to you, not get over it or don't be so angry. So instead of your looking to be more civil within yourself, in this case, I'm thinking, how is your recovering husband setting you up to feel bad about a very natural reaction to being betrayed that he just doesn't anticipate? He just figures, well, she should put up with that. If I'm a little late, what's the big deal? It's a very big deal. And especially for you, especially what you've gone through. And his lack of awareness of that is on him, not on you.
And he knew when he was driving home that he was late. So he had plenty of opportunity to address that.
Yeah, this is on him. And you get to be really angry at him. You get to say, I don't want to talk to you tonight, or I don't want to sleep with you tonight. That's great. And you know what? I can't say the words. I'm not allowed. Tammy will only say poop. I can't say the word I want to say. So go ahead.
You can say whatever you want. It's fine.
There you go.
So when we get into a heated conversation, hubby shuts down and wants to give up on recovery.
Yes.
We go back to denial blame game, and then I am 10 times as emotional and non-constructive in my means of communication.
Right.
And once words are out, you can't take them back, and that's true.
So here's the question. What is your husband doing to learn how to tolerate his feelings about having fucked up your marriage? Sorry, Tammy.
It's all good.
What is your husband doing to tolerate his own shame, his own humiliation, his own embarrassment of having fucked up your marriage? Because you have a right to be angry. And just because when you get angry, he feels ashamed, that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It means he does not have the ability to tolerate your feelings. That's not your problem. That's his problem. He needs to work in therapy or maybe see a psychiatrist or whatever it takes to be able to sit there and take your anger and say, you know what? I have earned this. I have created this situation. I deserve this. But it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean I'm worthless. It doesn't mean I don't deserve love. It's just a reminder that his behavior has consequences. And this is the consequence, your hurt, your anger. And it will take a while before that evaporates. One of the things that's really hard for me is when you spouses start to doubt yourselves and say, well, what if that upsets him? He's trying to get better. Forget that. It's not your job to protect the person who hurt you from themselves. That's their job. He needs to learn how to manage and tolerate his feelings, your feelings, and walking through a day that isn't going well without melting down. And if he can't do that, then he needs more help, not you. Now, if you're calling him names, if you're breaking dishes over his head, that is your problem. In other words, if you're being abusive in your anger, then that would push anyone into shame. But if you're sitting there saying, God damn it, I can't believe you were late again. He's going to have to put up with that and tolerate it. And not only that, but turn around and say, you're absolutely right. And if he can't do that, that's his emotional vulnerability and challenge, not yours.
Well, and I think it's interesting that the first thing is, I'll show you, I'm going to go use again. I'm going to get out of recovery. So that is not.
That's not recovery.
No, it isn't. So,
By the way, to the addicts in the room,
mhm.
we don't recover for our wives or our husbands or our job, and we think we are, but that's only the start. You know, we start recovery, and I know this because I've treated so many people. We start recovery because we want to get out of our consequences, and we want things to go better. We want our spouse to not be angry at us, and we want our job to be better. But ultimately, over time, if we continue the process, hopefully we get to the point where we're doing this for ourselves. And no matter whether you leave me or stay with me, whether my life goes good or bad, I want to be on this path because I want to be a better person. I want to be a man of integrity. I want to conduct my relationships with health and love. That's the reason to get healthy, not because you're mad at me. That's only the starting point.
Okay, so, well, it says, okay, I'm a love addict. This is embarrassing, but I'm driving around my city. I keep seeing the kind of car that my last obsession drives and looking to see if it's him. It's just so ridiculous because a lot of people drive this particular car where I live. Why do I do this, and what is a mental tool to stop?
Well, I don't know your background or history, but I do know that when my last primary relationship ended many years ago, I could not stop looking for Blue Mazda 6 coupes for months. Every time I saw Blue Mazda 6 coupe, that was my spouse or mate. So what I just want to say to you, what I hear is grief, unresolved. You are in pain. You are longing. You're hurting. You're missing. You're longing. I think the answer is to find places to grieve and places to feel safe, to be very, very sad, whether that's going to some workshops, going to some therapy, maybe going on a retreat. But I think the grief process is interrupted when you do things that make you feel bad about yourself, and then you're blaming yourself, and then you're like, why am I falling? Then you're mad at you. Well, what you're really hurting about is the loss. So let yourself feel really, really miserable and sad for a while, not alone, with people around you who love you. And here's another thought, and this is a very recovery thought. Next time it occurs to you that you want to go find his car, call someone you love who loves you back and say, I feel like I want to go out looking for him. Or today, or just call yourself on it. Today I was out at work and driving all over wherever I went, I looked for his car. I think it's important to tell people that, who will say to you, of course you were, you must miss him. Of course you were, you're lonely, rather than why are you doing this, there's something wrong with you. You should stop the behavior, but the feelings aren't going to stop. You need to find a safe place to work on those because you're in grief.
And I'm thinking, of course you were, let's meet for coffee, so it's anything that would, it's one of those things, disrupt the behavior right there too.
So guess what we have, Tammy? We have about 7 or 8 minutes. I think we have just a question or two left. I do want to tell you guys
we're done with questions. That was the last question. So
I'm here every Monday at 5 o'clock California time. I'm on a place called intherooms.com every Friday night at 6 o'clock California time. Did I tell you, Tammy, we went over 100 this week? We got 109 people in the rooms this week. That's just, I didn't know they went over 100, but that's what we had.
That's
so
awesome.
If you want to be in a larger group asking these questions, you can find me there. And I really do encourage you to drop in on some of these groups and talk to each other. I don't care if you put your finger over the camera, but be in a place where you can hear another woman's pain around her husband's acting out. Be in a place where you can hear a guy dealing with his spouse's anger and learning how to tolerate that. Rather than suffering with the shame that we sit with by ourselves, it's so much better to be with other people who can help us make sense of what we're feeling and get us through it. You have to understand, as human beings, we are best connected, and especially when we're struggling in pain. Unfortunately, our natural inclination when we're in pain is to isolate, and it's the most important time to push ourselves to connect. Are we running out of questions?
Well, we are out of questions, but I'm going to also give a plug for Mark Anthony Lord's Spirituality and Recovery webinar that will, he was sick and then off, and then last week was Valentine's Day, so we didn't have one, so we haven't had one in a few weeks, but on Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, there is a Spirituality and Recovery, and he does some mindfulness practices, and he really challenges you, especially if you were raised in a religious setting, or you've got some something that is problematic about your view of God or a higher power, he really disrupts that and gives you a different perspective on how to look at that. There's some pre-recorded webinars, but he's going to have a live one again this week, Thursday night. So I would invite you to take a look at that one as well.
And again, I just want to say to all of you that while the pain is not avoidable, the loneliness is. You do not have to be alone with these problems, and that is the greatest healing that we can give you is each other. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for joining us. Again, there's endless possibilities for help on sex and relationship healing, and there's the podcast and lots of books, and we're here for you. Write us if we want to find a therapist. Oh, and I do want to tell you, in fact, Tammy, can I ask them a question? There's 34 people here. So I'm going to say to all of you, I'm thinking about, I haven't done this a long time, but I'm thinking about running a 2-week intensive and doing the work myself. In other words, I'm thinking about being a primary therapist for 6 or 8 or 10 guys, men, I think, maybe in April in California. So if you think you might want to be a part of that, let me know, because I'm thinking about it, but I don't know how much interest there will be. So if there's a huge amount of interest, I might just go in there and sit down for 2 weeks and work with you guys. So if you're interested in that, let Tammy know. We haven't quite figured it out, but it's very likely in April I'll do a 2-week intensive in California. So we'll talk about that. Anyway, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you're here. Tammy, thank you for your time.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again out there in
Recovery land.
Yeah, recovery land. That's right. So, okay. Bye.